Hi everyone, this is Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1002. I want to put some lights on. Here we go, that's better. Module leader for TECH1002, social media innovation. And this is the short overview of the topics that we'll be covering in the fifth lecture, How Time Flies. And what we want to look at this week is, each week so far we've looked at the idea of mediation and the idea that as the medium through which we engage with the world, film, pop music, television, cable television, the internet, as these change, so does our sense of understanding of what we can do in that world and how we relate to each other changes in that world. So it's kind of we've used pop music and certain kinds of bands and certain kinds of practices that these bands are use and support, and how they address themselves in terms of fashion and photography and styling and art as a kind of a way of tracking these changes and seeing how they come about and what difference they make. So I suppose the question that you might be thinking is the music that you consume today, and that is your chosen genre of music that you kind of find says something about your life. How is that informed by different forms of media technology? So it's kind of like we're looking at these things for the purpose of being able to understand what we have around us and what we use today. So this week we're going to look at the introduction of sampling in electronic music in the 1980s. So we've shifted from the 60s through the 70s into the 80s and the early 90s with this. So we'll look at the idea of how sampling was introduced to pop music as a kind of creative form, as a creative practice that underpinned that kind of whole style of music which we now take for granted, and we're not even aware anymore that the pop music that we listen to is actually produced electronically and through forms of digitization. But this has a precedent, and it comes from the Italian futurist movement in the 1920s, at the early part of the 20th century. And it was the idea that you could manipulate sound and you could manipulate images which didn't have to be naturalistic, which didn't have to be a representation of the scene that is in front of you and its eternal values, but could represent ideas, that could represent a sense of what the potential was that is found in technology. The potential that is found in forms of electronic communication, the telephone, cinema, those kind of things. So we look at this in the idea of kind of looking at the Marinetti, who famously wrote a poem called Zang Tum Tum, which was used as the name for a record label by ZTT Records, who produced, amongst other things, The Art of Noise, Grace Jones, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Propaganda, and numerous other kind of big, kind of overblown 80s acts. But they had a footing in a kind of sense of what modernity stands for. The idea that, maybe this is looking at it, it's arguable that this is about a postmodernity. So taking the ideas of modernity, those things that we can manipulate the images and the world that we live in by reconfiguring the images that we see the world through and how we make sense of the world, and taking that and putting it into the form of a disposable pop song, again took it further along the path, if you like, of adaptation and experimentation with form, which took it away from any kind of originating content. So it became without a kind of the idea of the buzz phrase in postmodernism. It's kind of free floating signifiers is the phrase, and what that means is kind of it's a copy without an original. So the Mona Lisa is endlessly reproduced as an image which is sold on postcards, which is sold on t-shirts. I think we mentioned this at last week's lecture. The endlessly reproducible image and there's no original. What is the original? Actually, everybody's disappointed about the original. So it's this idea of kind of what we now call kind of hyperreality, and actually we put our faith in kind of fakes. There's a famous book by Umberto Eco called Faith in Fakes, which is, it's more likely that we believe the artificial construct and we're disappointed by the reality. So when we go to the Taj Mahal or we turn up at the pyramids in Giza, we're disappointed that they're overlooked by a pizza bar or something like that, or a Starbucks or something. So it's how we kind of, and how is this kind of integrated into a sense of what music is and how music is produced? Because when you can synthesize, when you can emulate sound, when you can emulate performance, you've no need for a musician. There is no authenticity to this. So that continuation from David Byrne and Talking Heads, questioning the authenticity of performance. Well, this is music by robots, not just music for robots, but it's music by robots. And there is no inherent authentic performance to be found. And we kind of live in a world of fakes, simulations, simulacra is the phrase. So we'll look at this in terms of loads of music videos for us to watch, some good ones, some probably not so good ones. And I get to the point where we're asking questions about, kind of the Matrix, that sense of hyperreality. Have we gone down the rabbit hole? So it's hopefully it's kind of good fun, and kind of it will help us to put in context some of the ideas that we might look at when we're considering how social networks exist and social engagement is characterized through social media. So the notes have been posted up onto the DMU Commons wiki. You can access them by going to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. Hopefully last week you've been producing your wiki profile pages. We've got the system working again, which is great. It'll be good to look at your profile pages. I'll certainly be interested in looking through them in preparation for your coursework submission, which is Monday, 10 o'clock on Monday on week 6. So you've got some work to be getting on with. So we'll speak to you soon.